Right, some other ways of how to create characters. We're going to look now at sort of techniques of how to create characters. A lot of people tend to interview their characters. They do character interviews where they maybe talk to the characters in their own heads. Another way of doing that is questionnaires. When I first started writing, I had this mega 10-page questionnaire that I used to do about all my main characters. It was, I think I cobbled it together from bits that I pulled off the internet and writing courses I'd been on, and I eventually put together this really long 10-page document with all these questions that included everything from the characters' routines and what they ate for breakfast and how they're dressed and their favorite color and favorite type of music. And let's face it, a lot of that never made it into the books. And while that kind of information is important and it really does help you get a grasp on your character, there are certain core questions, and we'll look at them later in this webinar, certain key questions that are actually way more important. That there's certain things you absolutely do need to know by the time or before you start writing your book. Some of this other stuff is superfluous. It might help you understand the characters, but necessarily knowing what they eat for breakfast every day and what their morning routine is not as crucial as understanding your character arc, which we're going to get into in a short while. Another technique that I like to use is called reverse casting, which is also like creating vision boards. So this is where you go online and find pictures of actors or models or just people on pictures off the internet that represent the character that you're writing, and then work backwards from there, creating the character. What I particularly like to use this technique because what I find is if I've got a picture that particularly encapsulates what that character is, and I keep it close to my desk when I'm writing, then when I get stuck as I'm writing a scene, if I'm sort of wondering what would this character do in the scene or how would they react, I can just look at the picture, and often the picture just sparks something for me. For example, if the character's a particularly sassy character and the look that they're giving in the picture that I've got on my vision board is a very sassy looking picture, it might just remind me that the way this character is going to react in the scene is going to be to give sass back to the other characters, etc. So, as I say, that works for some people. A lot of people on the complete other end of the spectrum like to just get to know their characters while writing the first draft. If you're a bit of a pantser and you don't like to do too much prep up front and you don't want to answer all the interviews and do all the questionnaires and stuff up front, sometimes just writing that first draft is what helps you get to know your characters. And then by the time you've got to the end of the first draft, you have a handle on who they are as people. And there's nothing wrong with any one of these ways of working. You just need to figure out what works for you. Another option is to base the character on someone else, either somebody you know or a real life person or another character from another book or another in a TV show or a historical figure or a celebrity. You just need to bear in mind, obviously, that if you're basing it on somebody you know in real life, you need to change that character enough that it's not recognizable, because you don't want to be the subject of a libel suit, especially if you've made that character your villain. And the same thing, obviously, if you've used a character from somebody else's story, you do need to change it sufficiently to make them fresh and new yourself, unless you're writing fan fiction, but that's a whole other thing. Another thing that a lot of people do, and I highly recommend this, is to create a backstory for your character. Know where they came from, what's brought them to this point in their life, know what makes them tick. And the one problem I see a lot of beginner writers doing, or an issue that I see with a lot of beginner writers, is they tend to write the backstory as the story itself. So the first few chapters will be this thing happened to the character, and then this happened, and then this happened, and then this happened. But it's not actually the story that's going to compel you or be intriguing to your reader. So that backstory is usually you as the writer writing it for yourself so that you can understand the characters. And if you do find yourself writing the first few chapters all being about the backstory and what's brought them to this point where this particular story starts, you just need to be aware that you may need to ditch your first few chapters, and that those are just purely for you to get to know your character. Another technique I highly recommend is obviously now Novel's dashboard. On the dashboard, there are all sorts of prompts where you can input details about your novel, and it gives you prompts for the setting and the plot and the characters. And I must say, I highly recommend this method as well, because I actually used it recently for my new story that I've just started working on. And it was really interesting. Some of those prompts that came up on character actually inspired certain ideas and gave me ideas of what to write in the book. So those prompts can be very useful.